When do you start Auburn? Whatever. It's down that. A little bit more detail about Ronnie after church. I'm going to read a text message that he sent me. And so we'll go into that a little bit more in detail, but continue to keep Ronnie in your prayers. Also, Jerry, he goes tomorrow to Chattanooga for some more tests and to meet with the doctor to find out what route they're going to take. Also, Miss Sadie Bruce, continue to keep Sadie in your prayers. Ed Byers, please keep him in your prayers. He's been falling a lot, so keep him in your prayers. Also, Beth, his daughter, she is at the hospital. She is having some antibiotics. She should be there a couple of days, so I'll kind of keep you updated on that. Also, Glenda and Harold. Josh Strange is going to have some tests run, so keep him in your prayers. Also, the spaghetti for the football team is going to be August the 21st, and we've got a sign-up sheet in the back, so just put your name there. We probably need between 10 and 11 crock pots of spaghetti, also garlic bread and salad, and we'll supply the tea. And so keep that in mind. I'll send out another text about that. That's coming up the 21st. We're not going to have any singing tonight, so y'all get to hear more of me. I don't know why I even bother. I honestly, Ross said good, but the rest of you, but anyway. All right, we're still looking at the book of Genesis, and if I do make a mistake, and I've said this before, and call it the book of Joseph, just overlook me, please, because his name is all throughout this book, and I do make a mistake every now and then, and I made one like 6-7 months ago, I think, but since then I've been pretty good. But if I do say the book of Joseph, just ignore me and just say he's talking about Genesis. And I'll tell the story again because it's a good story. I was pastoring a church, was going through Joseph, and after a while I kept going. One night I said, we're going to open your Bibles to the book of Joseph, and I caught myself, and I thought, I'm just going to see how many people start looking, and they was going. And they looked, and there's one guy, he looked in his table of contents, and he looked, and he kept looking, and he said, you don't know much, do you, preacher? I went, why? He goes, there's no book of Joseph. I said, well, I'm not the one that's been looking for it for the last 10 minutes, so I'll tell y'all who that was after. It was funny. All right, in the book of Genesis. I'll quickly go over what we went over last week. The book of Genesis, 75% of it, I guess, is dedicated to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The book of Genesis is a fascinating book. We're not going through the book of Genesis, but we're going to be looking at some of the life of a little bit of Isaac, and then the majority of Jacob, and then we're going to be looking at Joseph. And all three of these individuals, of course, are related. Father, son, grandfather, Abraham, great-grandfather. So they are all related. They are known as patriarchs of the Old Testament. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the patriarchs. And to kind of give you a brief overview of what we're looking at, and also basically an age of when all of these events happened. And when you start watching movies and they start telling these stories about the Bible, they will always depict these individuals as usually in their late teens or early 20s. But when you start looking at the life of Jacob, especially in the life of Jacob, his life journey actually begins when he's about 75 to 77 years old. So this is when his journey begins, and they all base that essentially on his death when he dies in Egypt at 147 years old. So I'll kind of give you a timeline as far as their age goes, what we're looking at. You'll find the names of his 4 wives and their 12 children. They had 1 daughter. And you'll find that in Genesis chapter 35, starting in verses 23, and it runs through 23 through 26. And it tells us that the sons of Leah, which is going to be the handmaid, or it's going to be his wife or the sister of Rachel. This is the first one that he married, and we went over that story last week, how he was going to marry Rachel. Her father Laban tricked him. He winds up marrying Leah. He works another 7 years to marry Rachel, and he makes him work another 2 years to eventually marry her. After 14 years, he finally gets to marry Rachel. So the daughters of Leah, or the sons of Leah, and keep in mind, these 4 individuals, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah, are the mothers of the 12 tribes of Israel. So this is where we get the 12 tribes of Israel from. And you'll find out who their mom is and who the children are. And it says, the sons of Leah, this is verses 23, chapter 35, is Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. That is the sons of Leah. And of course, those are the heads of some of the 12 tribes. And then Rachel, which was his really only love, and he loved these 2 boys above everyone else. And these are the sons of obviously Joseph, and we'll look at him. We'll kind of go into detail about his life. And also Benjamin. She dies during childbirth with Benjamin, Rachel does. So these are the 2 boys that she has. Bilhah, which is going to be the handmaid of Rachel, she is going to have Dan and Naphtali. She's going to have 2 sons. And then the handmaid of Leah, she is going to have Gad, Asher, are the individuals or the boys that she has. So those are your 12 tribes of Israel. Fascinating individuals. The book of Genesis, obviously, is a book of genealogy, and you can trace all of their genealogy if you would like to. And the name change, and we'll look at this, comes in chapter 35. If you want to know where the nation of Israel gets the name Israel, it actually comes from Jacob, because in chapter 35, when Jacob is on the run from Esau, he has a dream, and everybody's probably read this, where he goes and he finds a place and he renames it Bethel, which means where I have met God. And you'll find that story, and it's about the golden ladder, or the Jacob's golden ladder, about the angels ascending and descending, which is prophetic, telling Jacob at some time, we are not going to have to go through a high priest, but this is even before a high priest. Aaron, he's basically saying one of these days we are going to be able to pray directly to God. And that is basically symbolic of what that ladder stands for, the angels ascending and descending. And he tells us in chapter 35, this is very interesting. He is on the run from Esau, and he is about to go back to the land of Canaan. He has met up with Esau. Of course, this is the story where he wrestles with God and wrestles with him all night. And it gets to be daybreak, and the angel, God, tells him to let him go because the day is about to break. And Jacob tells him, I'm not going to let you go until you give me a blessing. And of course, he gives him that blessing, and he touches the hollow of his hip and throws his hip out of socket. And from the remainder of his days, Jacob walks with a cane or a limp. And we went over this kind of in our Sunday school last week, and it's one of those signs that when Jacob more than likely would get frustrated or forgetful of God, or really did not know what God is going to do in his life, he could probably look over in the corner of his room and see that cane standing there, and it was a reminder that God made him a promise. And this is one of these promises he's going to make in Genesis chapter 35. But what is neat is verses 2. Now, we look at Jacob, we look at Esau, we look at Abraham, we look at Isaac, and we think that these men are 100% godly men, and that there is nothing wrong with them, that they are sinless, but they are very much flawed individuals. Jacob has his wives, he has his sons, and he is going to make his way essentially to the land of Canaan. He is going to dwell there. But God gives him a warning, or gives him essentially an ultimatum. And this is the ultimatum. Jacob, who is a patriarch, Jacob, who is going to be the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, this is what God tells him in verses 2. Then Jacob said unto his household, because God has told him to do this, and to all that were with him, put away the strange gods that are among you, be clean, and change your garments. So from that time when he was living with Laban, his father-in-law, and his wives, they were still very much involved in idol worship. Pretty much throughout his life, when he was on the run, he was involved with some type of idol worship. So before God is going to bring him into the land of Canaan, before God is going to bless him, and he has to do this before God gives him this blessing, he is going to tell his wives and his servants that you have to put away the strange gods that are before you. And then God is going to appear to him. And this is what he says in verses 10. God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not no more be called Jacob, but shall be called Israel. So that is where we get the name Israel. That's how that nation gets his name. And this is what essentially he is going to tell him. He tells him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful, multiply, a nation and a company of nations. And that is still taking place today. And just kind of hold your finger there before God gives him a covenant. And God is going to make several covenants, not only with Abraham, he's going to make covenants with Isaac, and he is going to make a covenant with Jacob. If you go back to Genesis chapter 28, I know this is a lot of reading, but in Genesis chapter 28, after he is blessed and after he has stolen the birthright and he's fixing to be on the run, so to speak, Isaac is going to bless him. Isaac has to bless him. And he blesses Isaac, or he blesses Jacob. And then Jacob now is going to flee. And this is when he has the dream. And this is what he says in verses 20. Now look how he is going to speak before we get back to where we were at in. And Jacob vowed a vow to God. Now remember, a covenant is only honored by God, because he knows that mankind cannot honor a covenant. So that covenant is not broken. That covenant is going to be honored by God, and there is a belief that's been going around for probably maybe 2 years. And this is what they are saying, that Israel has given up or forfeited the covenant that God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that now the church is essentially God's chosen people. And that is wrong. A lot of people that do the TikTok religion, they will dive into that. And they'll just usually point at one covenant. But in actuality, Abraham gets 2 or 3 covenants from God. And each of those covenants is going to reassure the formal covenant. So what he is going to do is he is going to give this covenant to Jacob. And these covenants, even though Israel has probably tried to break these covenants, has turned away from God, they crucified Christ, God is still going to honor these covenants. And the covenant that he gives Jacob, and the covenant that he gives Isaac, and the covenant that he gives Abraham are essentially the same covenants. And this is the covenant he is going to give Jacob. He says, I am with thee, verses 10, Genesis chapter 28. I am with thee, and I will keep thee in all places wherever you go, and I will bring thee again into this land, for I will not leave thee. I have done that which I have spoken of. He tells Abraham 200 and something years, probably 150 years before this, in the book of Genesis, get away from your people, get away from your friends, get away from your country, and I'm going to show you a land that I'm going to give you. And he gives this covenant at least 3 times that is written, maybe more, we don't know. But he is essentially telling Abraham, you are going to be a stranger in a strange land. I am going to honor you, and I'm going to curse the nations that curse you, and I'm going to and bless nations that bless you. That covenant has not been broken at all. It is still true. So Isaac knows about this covenant. Jacob is finding out about this covenant. Abraham knew about this covenant. So more than likely, Jacob was not ignorant of this covenant that was given not only to Abraham, but also to his father. So now he is getting this covenant, and that is why they are known as the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But I want you to look now at the faith of Jacob. God is literally speaking to him in a voice. And this is what he said, and we would more than likely do the same thing. And Jacob vowed a vow to God, and he uses a two-letter word, if. God has told him, he's told Abraham, and he's told Isaac, and now he is telling Jacob, I'm going to give you a land. You're going to be a stranger in a strange land. I'm going to bless you, the next generation, and generation after generation after generation. This covenant will not be broken. I will honor this covenant. But Jacob is the only one that questions this. And he says, if God will be with me, all right. In verses 15, what did God tell him? I am going to, but what? Keep thee. I'm going to go with you in all places. And then Jacob is going to pray a prayer, and he's going to say, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way I go, and look where his mind is. Remember, these are patriarchs. What is it that Jacob wanted more than anything else from Esau? He wanted his birthright, and he wanted a double blessing. Jacob's mind is always on things of the earth or things of the world, things that are going to pass away. God has already promised him that I'm going to be with you, I'm going to keep you, I will not leave you. It says, I have done that which I have spoken of thee. I'm going to stay with you. And he even goes further over in verses 13. It says, behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, thy father, and of Isaac. And he says, the land whereon thou liest, to thee I will give it to, and to thy seed. So that covenant is for the land of Israel, for the Jewish people, for the Hebrews. That is their land. But he tells him, or he vows a vow to God, and he's essentially saying, okay, if you will honor this, God, this is what I'm going to do in return for you. What Jacob is doing is he is essentially trying to barter with God. And he says, if you will keep me, this is verses 20, be with me and give me bread and clothes. You notice where his mind is? He says, if you would honor all this, oh, and by the way, make sure I'm fed, make sure I've got clothes. And he says, so that I can come again to my father's house in peace, then, not now, but when all of this takes place, then shall the Lord be my God. Wow, have y'all ever noticed that? We look at these individuals and they are human beings. Their DNA is just like our DNA. God is speaking to Jacob, not only in a dream, but he speaks to him outside of dreams. And he tells him, I'm going to be with you, I'm going to keep you. And Jacob says, if you'll give me food and clothes, and all of this comes to fruition, then you can be my God. Are we like that sometimes? That we like to barter with God? And so, well, if you're going to say you're going to do all the things to do, let me see it, let me experience, and then I'll think about it, and then you can be my God. But if you notice, if God was going to break a covenant with the nation of Israel, or was going to break a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, do you not think that he would have broke a covenant there? God could look down upon him and is like, listen, I'm tired of dealing with unbelief. I'm tired of the ifs and in the whens. I'm just going to start all over. But God has made a covenant with his father and also his grandfather. And that covenant is absolutely still true today. All right, now, the original covenant that, and I promise we'll get into their lives, and I want to kind of give you all this background because we talked about last week, if you pull one verse out of the book of Genesis, one verse, snatch it away, then the rest of everything else after that falls completely apart. All of it does. So that's why these covenants are so important. If you go to Genesis chapter 12, this is the very first covenant that God is going to make with Abraham. Verses 1. And now the Lord had said unto Abram, this is before he changes his name, get thee out of thy country, thy kindred, thy father's house, unto a land that I will show you. Here is the covenant. I will make thee a great nation. I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. I will bless them that bless you. I will curse him that curseth you, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. At that time, when Abraham is learning about this, the only earth that was known to them was basically that general area. So you can look at this in two aspects. God is saying, I'm going to bless the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel, that bloodline. And then Abraham more than likely had no idea what God was talking about when he says the families of the earth. Because up until then, Christopher Columbus had not discovered the New World. The only thing that was known was the Middle East in that area. So what this is looking at is not only a physical promise for the land of Israel, but it is also a spiritual promise. Because if you go over to the book of Romans, what are the Gentiles described as? We are described as a wild vine, and we are engrafted into that line of Abraham, which is spiritual. And it tells us that by faith Abraham, by faith Moses, by faith Noah. So he is looking at this not only as a covenant that this is your land, but not only that, there's going to come a time where all men will come to the acknowledgement of Christ not through blood, but through the blood of Christ. So keep that in mind. So he tells them, I'm going to bless them and I'm going to curse them. If we go over to chapter 15, second time he's going to establish his covenant. Abraham in chapter 15 is alone with God, and God is going to put him is going to tell him to make a sacrifice to me. And this is what he says. He says, I am him, this is verse 7. And he said unto him, I am the Lord that has brought thee out of Ur and of our Chaldees into this land to inherit. What is that land? The nation of Israel. And God said, and he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know this inheritance? And he said, take me a heifer of 3 years, and a she-goat of 3 years, and a ram of 3 years, turtle doves, and a young pigeon. And he took all of those, and he divided them. He cut them in half. And he laid one piece on one side, but the birds he divided not. So he's got these two rocks, essentially. And he makes this sacrifice, and all the animals except for the birds, are going to be divided. So he divides them, and when the fowls come down upon the carcass, he drives them away. This is a sacrifice that Abraham is making. So in verses 12, the sun is going to go down, and Abraham falls into a deep sleep, and there's darkness all around him. And now God is going to establish again this covenant with him. And this is how he establishes this covenant. And he says unto Abraham, know of surely that thy seed shall be a stranger in a strange land that is not theirs. And you shall serve them, and they shall afflict them for 400 years. What land is that? Egypt. And that comes in the book of Exodus. So he's going to say, your family, y'all going to be strangers in a strange land that does not belong to you, which is Egypt. And it's going to be 400 and some odd years. And he says, and also that nation whom they shall serve, I will judge. Did God judge the nation of Egypt? Yes. Now, let's take out verses 14 and 15. Let's remove those two verses out of Genesis, chapter 15. And we go, and those verses are gone. And then we go to the book of Exodus. Then we start thinking, how did the Israelites get into Exodus? What are they staying there for 400 years for? All because you've took out those two verses. You see how everything starts falling apart? Now look, and thou shalt go to thy father in peace, and thou shalt be buried in good old age. All right, so there's the covenants. And he also makes that covenant again with Jacob in chapter 35. Now, In chapter 36, you essentially get the lineage of Esau, and he has a outstanding lineage. He really does. Okay, now for the age or the timelines for this. You can write these down. Isaac and Rebekah have Jacob and Esau at the age of 60-ish. And of course, again, or Isaac and Rebekah are cousins, and Jacob and Rachel and Leah are cousins, so they're all related. So they're about 60 years old. When Jacob and Esau have a falling out between 70 to 72 years old, somewhere in that time frame. He's around that age when he flees. He's around 91 years old when he has Joseph. He's 97 years old when he finally makes it to Canaan. He's 130 when he moves to Egypt. And he dies in Egypt at 147 years old. So there's their age, how they're depicted. All right, now, we see that he has a very dysfunctional life, a very dysfunctional family. There is a story, and I've never preached out of it. I've never really discussed it. I have discussed it in private, that takes place in chapter 34, which tells you the kind of sons that he had. These boys was not the kind of kids that you would want your kids to run around with, or you would want your kids to hang out with. The 12 tribes of those 12 boys was rough. They were very rough. There's a story in chapter 34 where the only daughter that he has goes to a place called Shechem. And her name is Dinah, and she is the daughter of Leah. And she is taken advantage of by the king's son. And the king's son falls madly in love with her. So what Levi, priestly tribe, and Simeon decide is we're fixing to put one over on this town. So this king and his son come and they start talking with Levi and Simeon. And they're like, listen, my son's in love with your sister. Please just let him marry. And they say, well, we'll let you marry her, but you got to do something. Because y'all got to be Jews. We're not going to let her marry an uncircumcised Gentile. He says, so here's what we want you to do. Go circumcise all the males in your village, all of them. And they're like, can we marry your daughter? Yeah, you can marry her then. And they wait after they're circumcised for about 3 days. And Simeon and Levi go in and kill every man in that village. That's the kind of people we're dealing with. So, and Jacob does not get on to them, so to speak. He just bygones be bygones. So now we get to chapter 37. All of that being said, all of it, Jacob has finally arrived in the land of Canaan, milk and honey. And what is amazing to me about this, Israel is not a very big nation. The place that Jacob is going to be, the place that he is going to dwell, where his sons are going to feed their sheep, is more than likely the same area, not Israel, so to speak. It is Israel. And some of the cities and towns that more than likely that those 12 spies went out and spied. So now they are finally getting into that. And it says, and Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger and in the land of Canaan. He's finally made it to Canaan. Him and his 12 boys and his daughter. And it says, and he goes and it tells us that these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, at this time, is only 17 years old. And he has a younger brother by the name of, what's his name? Benjamin. They are literally blood brothers. The rest of them are all stepkids. And his mother is going to be Rachel. So Joseph and Benjamin, keep those two names in mind. Their mom is Rachel, and she dies during childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. And Jacob loves Joseph, loves him above the rest of his kids. And it's interesting, you say, well, how can he be like that? If you go back and you study the lives of Isaac and Rebekah, it says that Isaac loved Esau and Rebekah loved Jacob. So this is basically all he has known, all of his life. So it tells us, he says, this is verses 2. Being 17 years old, Joseph was 17, feeding the flocks with his brethren, the same boys that went in and slaughtered an entire village. Okay? And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zelphar. Probably those are more the rougher kids. Okay? His father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Do you know what Joseph is early in his life? He's called a tattle snitch. He's a tattletale. But you see how, you must have been one of them, Tristan, but you see how he is painted and depicted in this. And what is amazing to me, does Joseph have faults? Yes, he has faults. But if Joseph would have never went and snitched on his brothers, then you would not have the rest of Genesis chapter 37, because this sets up everything. That's why it's important. Every verse is matter of fact, and every verse is important. So he's one of these kids, more than likely, that you would have in class, and the teacher would say, hey, we might have a pop quiz on this tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, and Joseph raises his hand and goes, hey, we're having that pop quiz because I studied for it. He'd be one of them kids. I was not that. Now Israel, Jacob, now when you see this, and at times in the scriptures, in Genesis, he will be referred to as either Jacob or Israel. There's nothing significant about that. There's no spiritual significance about that. The writer sometimes decided to call him Israel, and then the writer sometimes decided to call him Jacob. Okay? Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children. I know all of us in here, the majority of us have kids. If you got more than one kid, you love them the same, but the kids are usually not the same. With these boys, Israel, Jacob made no bones about it. I love Joseph. The rest of you boys, I care less about. That's essentially what his attitude was. I don't like you. I mean, you're just, and he essentially tells them this later on in his story, basically how he feels about his sons. Now, does he have a father's love? No. I mean, now you look back and you say, well, the reason his kids were so mean, I mean, look how Jacob treated them. Isn't it amazing how when God writes or gives the people that write the Bible the inspiration, how he paints every aspect of them, the good and then the bad. Everything goes with it. If you think about the story of Jonah, if we were Jonah, we'd say, hey, God, first 3 chapters, great. Leave them in there. That 4th chapter, you'd probably leave that out, where I get mad and upset. But God gives us all the aspects of this to let us know these people that were chosen by God, that settled the nation of Israel, that we are talking about over 4,000 to 5,000 years later, had faults. And they were just like us. And the God that they served, the God that forgave them, the God that showed them mercy, the God that did not break those covenants, is the same God that we serve today. Is that not amazing? And you look at everything that God has done from Genesis chapter 1 all the way up to Genesis chapter 37. Miracle after miracle, and covenants and promises and mercy and grace. It's the same God we serve. But yet sometimes in our lives, do we limit God? We actually limit God. And it says now in verses 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than the other children because he was the son of his old age, and he makes him a coat of many colors. And I've said this about certain stories in the Bible. There's certain stories in the Bible that somebody that's never darkened the doors of a church, that does not come from a Christian home, that's never been to Bible school, that's never read the Bible, there's certain stories that they just know. They just know. Jonah in the well, people knows. David and Goliath, people know. And Joseph and his coat of many colors. People know that story. It's just one of them stories you know. And there is any book or any commentary that you get with the book of Genesis, a book of Genesis commentary, there'll usually be about a chapter dedicated just to that one verse in chapter 37, verse 3, about that coat. What did it represent? Is Joseph a type of Christ? Yes, Joseph was hated by his brethren. Jesus Christ was hated by the coat that Joseph had. They tear it to pieces. You remember that when Jesus Christ was on the cross, they divided his garments. So a lot of things in the life, and I'll have a list for you next time, the similarities between Joseph and Jesus, and there's a lot of them. So he makes him this coat of many colors, and I'm going to give you kind of a backstory on this, and then we'll close. What this was basically, and we've talked about this before, and the older generation may know what I'm talking about. Who's ever heard of an out and gown? She knows about it because I got one. But an out and gown, you ever took flour sacks and your mom would cut a hole in the top and put it over? That's what they call them. And the reason it's called outing is because there was a material, and the name of the material was outing. That was the name of the material. And they would call them out and gowns. And it was essentially just a hole cut in the sheet and just put over it. Okay? This is what he made him, but he went a step further. Now, he could not go to Walmart or to somewhere to get the different colors. Their colors was extremely difficult to get. So this coat that he makes him, in that time, would be considered extremely expensive. And this coat told everybody else, this is how much my Father loves me. This is how much my Father cares for me. Do you remember the story of the prodigal son? What was one of the items that the father gave his son? A robe. It's royalty. What he is looking at right now, he is essentially telling Joseph, I love you more than anybody else. But do you know what also he's doing to Joseph? He's putting a target on his back. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children because he was a son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. We're going to stop there. Dear Heavenly Father, we love you and we thank you. Dear God, as we go through the lives of Jacob, of Joseph,